So now we come to the third technical effort in this project, which was to put all of the information together that we found quality data for to develop an index, which is a relative ranking of suitability for groundwater recharge banking in the SACOG area. So this slide shows you an overview of the approach we use to evaluate groundwater recharge suitability. It is an index approach, as I said, which makes use of the information developed in Task 1, or the hydrogeology information, plus surface soil information and crop suitability, and I'll explain a bit more about each of those as I come to them. So these three sets of information, including subsurface suitability, which includes conductivity and depth to groundwater, soil and crop information, were developed as spatial data so that they could be layered and combined in GIS. And I'll describe each one of these a little bit more as we look at the spatial results. For subsurface suitability, which this map shows, hydraulic conductivity was scored as good, fair, or poor based on the range in the conductivity data. So we use those rankings for each of the factors in the index and then in the final results as well, because we wanted to keep it fairly simple. And the same was done for aquifer thickness. These two factors were combined to get a subsurface suitability rank of good, fair, or poor. And this map shows the dry condition subsurface groundwater recharge suitability, which was taken from example year 2012. The blue areas indicate the best or most suitable for recharge based on conductivity and depth to groundwater. So in dry years, depth to groundwater would be lower, so unsaturated aquifer thickness would be larger, expanding the area to its maximum potential. But here you see in wet years, as this map shows, the good and fair areas decrease and the poor areas increase in area because the aquifer thickness decreases when water tables rise. So that just shows you the impact of the dry and wet condition on the subsurface suitability part of the index. Now this map shows surface soil suitability. And for this factor we use SAGB, the Soil Agricultural Groundwater Banking Index, developed by Toby O'Gene and his team at UC Davis. This index rates soils based on soil survey information down to a depth of about 5 or 6 feet on a scale of 1 to 6. And considers factors for groundwater recharge suitability such as soil texture, infiltration rate, and conductivity, and even chemical constituents that might impede infiltration. So because there were 6 ratings in SAGB, we condensed those into the 3 categories of good, fair, and poor to be consistent with the other ratings in the index. We use the modified SAGB actually, which assumes that all ground crops with permanent crops has been deep ripped. And this assumption improves the suitability index for many soils because when you deep rip a soil, it increases the number of channels for water infiltration. So then we move on to crops. And crops were ranked for suitability based on different factors depending on if they are permanent or annual crops. The permanent crops were scored as good, fair, or poor, considering 3 things, being saturation tolerance, dormancy period, and N requirement. So saturation tolerance varies between permanent crops, and of course that's an important factor because some orchard crops just don't like to have long periods of saturation, and it would impact the health of the tree quite a bit and impact yield as well. Dormancy period was determined by chilling hours, and the rationale there was that the longer dormancy period you have, the more opportunity you have to use additional irrigation and flood during that winter season when the trees are dormant. The third factor there for permanent crops was N requirement, and that's because if the crop has a high N requirement, that produces more potential for N leaching, and the potential for N leaching is relatively high during groundwater banking activities because the crop is dormant and not growing and producing fruit and using nitrogen. So groundwater recharge has to be careful of that it doesn't contaminate groundwater with nitrogen. Annual crops were scored considering requirement as well, but also considering management practices and seasonality. Because dormancy period, of course, isn't an issue with annual crops. And we also didn't consider saturation tolerance because we assumed that these annual crops would not be in the ground during the recharge period. So we considered management practices such as land preparation. If an annual crop goes in the spring, but it requires a month or two of land prep before that, then that would infringe upon the recharge season. And then seasonality just refers to when that crop actually goes in and out of the ground, how long the growing season is, and therefore how long the opportunity is to recharge. So crops that were rated as good or fair as a result of this process included grapes, stone fruit, pears, and apples in the good category, and walnuts, almonds, pistachios, kiwi fruit, and pomegranates in the fair category. So this map on this slide shows that grapes are concentrated in the southern Sacramento County area, and then there's also some in Yolo County over on the west side, or well, in central Yolo County, but on the west side of this region. Another concentrated area of fair rated crops in general was where Placer, Yuba, and Sutter counties converge, sort of on that western Placer, southern Yuba, and eastern Sutter County area there. This map shows the final result of the groundwater recharge suitability index when all the factors, including subsurface suitability, surface soil suitability, and crop type, which include many factors associated with them as we described, are combined. So similar to the crop map, we find that there are good or fair rankings that resulted in three main areas on this regional map. One of them being in southern Sacramento County, the other being in central Yolo County, and the other being on that area where western Placer County borders Yuba and Sutter counties. The areas that were ranked as good and fair are enlarged a little bit under dry conditions because, again, aquifer thickness increases under dry conditions because the depth of the water table is lowered.